update and charts of the day. Wonderful to see you here. I hope you're good. I hope you're well. Thank you very much for popping in today to the session. And I hope your week's been good so far. Great to see you here. And thank you to all of you who managed to make Inner Circle last night. I know it's a little bit more difficult with YouTube, but it is appreciated that you made the effort. So thank you for that. Let's just pop up the important message that we always have to do. Just to remind you that this is for educational purposes only. Please make sure that you do your own due diligence on anything that you see or hear. Make sure that you manage risk according to your trading plan within your own personal trading objectives and financial situation. So thank you, as I said, for that. Let's have a quick look at the headlines for today. So just this little screen here, and we'll just walk through them, and then we'll have a little bit of a deeper dive. So we saw markets eke out small gains across the board last night. Again, we're sort of remaining near record highs. Despite a fall in that September rate cut expectation, we're now down to 50-50. Remember, we were in excess of 65% less than a couple of weeks ago, but of course we had that warmer than expected CPI number with, of course, many jumping on the reality that tariffs are beginning to have an inflationary effect that is being shown in those numbers. Of course, it is only one number, and next month's number will be even more important. Trump has obviously taken an aim at Jerome Powell. Really rude, suggesting he is incompetent, too slow. Just to reiterate, that'll be interesting. He has said he's not going to sack Jerome Powell. I'm not sure he's got the power to do that anyway. But he's got around about 9 months of his reign left, essentially, before the before the next Trump chosen chairman of the Fed takes over. He was also very critical of other Fed members as well, of course. Earnings season has started. As I said, there's some evidence, not only in the CPI numbers, but Japan had a fairly rotten trade balance number this morning, which didn't go down well with the Nikkei, of course. Good day to Wayne and Sonia, of course. Thank you very much for saying hi. Always appreciated. US futures are lower on the back of that news. Asian markets are mixed with that Nikkei underperformance. I've said the ASX is actually rather chirpy. It was up around about 0.5% when last I looked. And European futures are pointing to a mildly positive open. That just reflects where the US market closed compared to, European markets closed compared to where the US was at that time. The USD continues to edge high, maybe breaking out of that downwards trend channel we've been talking about for some time. Possibly early doors to call it completely, but nevertheless, we are seeing that move up, and certainly those CPI numbers helped. Gold remains range bound, hasn't sold off significantly, but it is below that 3360 key level. And copper's edging lower from that record highs after last week's surge. Oil's testing the low part of the range, which we'll have a look at all of those things on charts in a moment. Bitcoin's paused. Seems to be bouncing up and down around a 4K range between about 116 and 120. Again, we'll check out the chart. And so, of course, earnings and trade news will obviously continue to be important. We do have Netflix, I think, reporting after the bell tonight, which is the first of the big tech guys. That will be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see because big tech have led the rally to the upside. Be interesting to see if there's any inferences made from Netflix's earnings. We'll be able to sort of see what that's like in tomorrow's early doors. As for today, we had some Australian jobs numbers out, and they were really weak. So if the RBA were under any doubt at all to drop rates, I think that probably is the catalyst. But that caught the markets by surprise a little bit. We've got Eurozone CPI later, although it is the final CPI, so unlikely to be a massive move away from what's expected. And then US weekly jobs, manufacturing data, and retail sales tonight, all ready and waiting to be reported upon. So let's just see if we can have a look at the web today. Sometimes takes a little bit of time just to flick over. No, it's not doing it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to charts. I'm just going to give it one more try. Let's just flick off and on. There we go. It really does. The software really doesn't like it at all. Oh, there we go. Let's try that one. Yay! Okay, we're there. Okay, so here's what the US did last night. You can see there we hit our low around about lunchtime before bouncing, of course, and that's why the European futures are looking positive because we stopped. European markets closed around this time here, and then we got that move to the upside. Yeah, perseverance counts. Um, if we look at the futures, as I said, they're looking a little bit shaky. These have actually got slightly worse since last I looked, but the European futures are looking okay. Some buying coming into oil, gold and copper are pulling off a little bit, and we can see the strength in that US dollar continuing. The yen looking particularly weak on that data, and the Aussie is dropping significantly subsequent to that jobs report that we have just referenced. So looking at, wow, ASX is going completely la-la. It must be because of the expectation of a rate cut. We'll just check out on the ASX in a minute, but you can see we've got the Hang Seng and the Shanghai are both dropped to around neutral, and the Nikkei has recovered a little bit, to be fair. Let's check out the ASX and see what's creating that. So we've got a fairly across-the-board rally there. Most sectors looking fairly perky. And as I said, towards the highs of the session, that's even popped up since I looked at it around about an hour ago. And all 11 sectors to the upside, we can see there. So a good day for the ASX. And as I said, that's probably due to that jobs number, which we can have a look at now. You can see there we were expecting 21,000 jobs added, only got 2,000. Although that was better than last month, it was significantly worse than expected. And you can see there, 0.2% is a big jump on the unemployment rate. So perhaps with a little more detail on that, perhaps part-time jobs have been added. But that unemployment rate is really quite scary in terms of the headline number. As I said, the final CPI numbers coming out of the Eurozone later on today, and then three big numbers really out of the US retail sales, which are expected to be slightly more positive. Unemployment claims are expected to be around about neutral. And the Philly Fed Manufacturing Index is expected to be slightly better than it was last time this was reported. So some interesting stuff going on there. If we look at what's happening tomorrow, then you can see there lots of Fed numbers speaking overnight. That's going to be interesting. We've got Japanese CPI out, German PPI, and some housing data out of and consumer sentiment out of the US. So it has been a busy week for data, but of course earnings are going to take hold next week as being one of the major acts for markets to work on. Right. Okay. So let's dive into some charts, shall we? Let's just do a little bit of flick around. There we go. We've got copper up to start with. So I was talking about copper on the chart of the day, which you can also see on YouTube. You can see this is this price surge last week. Bit of a pull down there to find this level around about 550, which has been tested the last 5 days. Somewhat interestingly, it looks as though it's paused there. What this does is potentially create two opportunities. Creates an opportunity to the downside should we breach 550. I would actually put this down to on the hourly chart, probably around about that that 549 level there. Um, you can see plenty of blue sky there. Should we start to see some buying back into copper? Then 554 could offer an opportunity to the upside as we had at the beginning of the week, as we had a couple of days ago, perhaps a bounce back up to around 562. So copper is one worth keeping on your radar. If we look at the Nasdaq, you can see there the Nasdaq futures are still around record highs, irrespective of what the market throws at at the whole thing at this stage seems to be brushed off. You would imagine that decrease in expectation of rate cut would have been bearish for markets, but not so, it appears from that. If we look at the Dow just as an alternative, of course, we've had banks reporting this week. You can see a little less convincing, but nevertheless, still doing okay. We're only, to put it into context, around about 1.5% from record highs. So not exactly a capitulation, and we had a positive day last night. If we look at how the banks have performed, they've been a bit of a mixed bag. Let's look at JPM. You can see JPM there was that earnings drop, or earnings candle there. So it really hasn't done much at all outside of normal market movements. So yeah, just keep an eye on that. As I said, Netflix is key tonight. As for the US dollar, as I said, we've been in this downward trend channel since really January. So we look as though we're pushing out of this. And I did suggest that this level around about 97.80 was possibly an important one to suggest a move out of this trend channel would be key. Next level of interest, if you are interested in trading this, is around about 98.50. But this looks as though, with weakness in the Aussie and the yen this morning, and that's certainly helping the USD without a doubt. There's gold holding up very nicely, 3360. Copper we've covered, and there's oil, which is at the bottom of this range, between around 66 or 67, should we say, and 69 ish. We've tested this the last 3 days. It doesn't look as though it's that keen to go down from here. But we could have a short term, for those of you who like a potential oil scalp, should we breach 66.57, could be a move down of around about $1.50 or so to test this 65.85 level. Bitcoin bouncing up and down within this range. If we look at what's happening this morning, just a little bit of a sell-off. Looks unconvincing. If we do get a breach of 120, 123 is now the target. But at this stage, it looks as though we might drift down back into this sort of 116, 117 type area. But it wouldn't surprise me to see it bounce around this range for some time, to be fair. So of those potential, if you like, larger asset classes, then copper looks really interesting for right now. And possibly the US dollar index, but as I've always said, it might be prudent to trade the underlying currency. And you can see the strength in the USD this morning after weakness last night. 148.61. There's that inflation candle. So that was all given away. I don't know what this is. Maybe this is Jerome Powell comments from Trump. So we see this moving up. Watch for 148.61, potential 30 pip or maybe even 40 pip move back up to test 149. That's actually not a bad potential trade. Should we get there? It may be data dependent as we go throughout the day. Look at the Euro USD. Yeah, there's that big candle again. But we look as though we've drifted down into this range. This actually looks quite interesting as a possible opportunity. We've confirmed our move through 116.27 and moved down to 116 looks on the cards. Maybe even a little lower than that. That support is around about 115.95. So both of those look interesting. But let's have a look at the Euro Kiwi. This was chart of the day last night, I think, from memory. And this was the level that we thought was interesting, around about 195.68. It did explode through that, came down, and is retesting the high from yesterday, 196.38, possibly being dragged down by the Aussie, because of course those two currencies are fairly well correlated on the back of that weak jobs data, and we can see there 0.7% move in Asia already. That's a really strong move. The Aussie getting belted across the board. Um, might be a wee bit late in that. Obviously, that jobs data is what sent it higher. You can see a sea of red with the Aussie dollar. So we're just looking for the next key level on the Aussie yen. Again, if you'd seen it happen, this last hour has been particularly brutal, or last 2 hours. Um, so there is a possibility. There was the low from last night at around about 96 and change. So a breach of 96, I think, is possibly worth keeping an eye on a 4 hourly chart. That would also breach this potential um, resistance around here, just over 96, and a move down to maybe 95.60 could be on the cards. That's certainly not a bad opportunity. There's not much chance of a pause there if we look technically going backwards. Let's just check out on Aussie US, with the US being strong. Whew, holy moly. So yeah, so there's that breach. A 30-minute chart. That was the last 30-minute bar, which was around about 25 minutes ago. I confirmed the move through 64.88. Um, Sort of difficult to find a line in the sand here worth can put up and down about, but possibly that level at around about 64.72. I don't think this is as clean as some of the other crosses we've looked at. What about the Aussie Swissy? Now, a little distance to go there, but 51.78 is probably worth keeping an eye on. And the Aussie Canadian dollar. Fill a gap there. Okay, and the Aussie Canadian dollar. I think really it's possibly a case of just keeping an eye on two or three of the favorites. To me, the Aussie Canadian dollar would be really interesting if it breached 88.67, um, which is around about 20 pips away from where we are now. Just to put this into context, this would test the lows from the 7th of July and possibly see us move down to this level here. Maybe that's a bit generous. Um, so maybe a move down to 88.37. So that's about a 30 pip move, which on this is about 1.5 ATR on the 4 hourly chart. So it's quite a significant move. If we're trading it on the hourly, then of course the ATR is significantly lower. So it's a 2 ATR move potentially should we breach 88.67. So I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, and I also um, quite like the Aussie yen. Should we get a breach of 96? Cool. On to the ASX. So some interesting charts to keep an eye on the ASX. Just a couple that we referenced last night. We referenced the uranium stocks, Paladin looking interesting. I'm just going to make sure we've got all the candles here. So we're looking for a breach of around about 802. This was high back here, end of July. It was at the end of last year as well. A breach of this could see us up to around about 860. Linus has dropped off, so we're not interested in that really anymore. If you like your cows, then maybe AAC is a good one to have a wee look at. Fill in the gaps here. We've breached the 200 MA. This could be good for a move up to, I guess, is that some corporate news? Yeah, maybe about 4% on that, which might be an interesting one to hold. Megaport was also looking interesting yesterday. Uh, Continues to look interesting today. With a nice line in the sand here, which would be record highs at around about 14.55. Yeah, that is quite interesting. Um, James Hardy bounces around a little bit, having a better day today. Nothing there going on for me. And A2 milk, is that Freudian that we've accidentally clicked on that? No. Okay, so with A2 milk, we've got a nice bounce off the 200 MA, but I'm not sure there's much in this. Possibly move up to $8, which I guess is around about 5%. So maybe, but I think this might get stuck around 788. It's not jumping up and down for me. Just watch Mesoblast over the next few days if we reach 185. Anything here? Let's check out on the retail sector. I think Scali is still up. Still a little bit of work to do to get over 1920. Banks looking sort of okay, but on the back of some reasonable US numbers. That's actually not a bad call. Around about 30.43. Upside possibly to around about 31.30. Let's just check out. I just want to check out a 360 ASX. There we go. So we had this gap up a couple of days ago, and I got a continuation of that. I like this. I think that's a positive mover at the highs of the session, looking to breach 36. So I'm going to give you a couple to keep an eye on. 360 ASX is good. Watch for Megaport on breach of 14.54. I'm just going to check out Macquarie before I plant my flag in something else. It's got a little work to do, Macquarie, has it? Yeah. So we'll stick with those two, 360 ASX and Megaport. Onto the US. Tesla almost back at 330. There's your 10% again. Nice bounce off that. You'll have heard about that on the next bar. Nvidia just keeps on going. 171 was last night's close. That's a record close for Nvidia. They've got a couple of weeks till their report. I just want to check out Delta because I think Delta have reported already. Obviously a good report, but since then they've done very little. But you do have a line in the sand around about 58.80, which suggests that 58.20, and there may be a sort of move up towards about 7% up to 62.63. So that's certainly worth keeping on your radar. AMD again continues to smash ever higher. This was a chart of the day. Earlier in the week on a breach of 143, you'd have already made your money on that. Around about a 10% move up this week. Yeah, 9.44. We're hitting the next level. Potentially at 160, with a potential move to 170 is the next port of call. It's around about another 8%. So, watch Delta Airlines. I just want to put on Micron. The good thing about Micron is it reports outside of the normal. Oh, Microsoft is moving. There's Microsoft on the weekly chart. I talked about this. 500, I said. Edge are never higher, but of course got earnings coming up. MU. Oh, got belted. Down 3%. That's unusual. They must have had some corporate news come out. That's potentially a short. Anyway. So there you go for today. Let's just see if the Aussie keeps on getting belted. Indeed it does. It continues to move downwards. As I said, we're getting ever closer to that 96. I don't think it's going to be a good day for the Aussie. You guys take care. We'll see you back on Monday. Thank you very much for popping in today. You guys take care of yourselves. Trade safe. Um, and enjoy your weekend, of course. We'll see some of you EA guys tonight on P5. But thank you very much for being part of this. I'll love and leave you. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. And bye bye for now.